It all started with Demon Souls. Then it was Dark Souls 2, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, and Sekiro. These games are the Souls, and they make up the last 10 years of FromSoft's success. What do they have in common? Many things, but one of them is always regarded above the others. These games are hard. Soon, Elden Ring will be among us and it will be a part of the Souls. As all of these games become more and more popular and more players decide to play them, we have seen an increased amount of time dedicated to the discussion of whether these games are too hard. I am not going to enter this discussion in this video. I think that it has been done to death and anything that I can say will not really add much to the discussion. One day, I may sit down and put my thoughts into a video, share my opinion and my thought process on this matter. That said, today is not that day. I do want to talk about difficulty though. Specifically, I want to talk about just how hard Elden Ring will be, or better said, just how hard can it be. After being able to play the closed network test, after seeing all of the new mechanics that the game offers and very different experiences from multiple sources, I feel like I am able to make an educated determination regarding how hard I believe this game will be. I want to share this with you as a way to prepare you, but also as a way to show you that the difficulty of these games is never set in stone, and it truly depends on you as a player. Not so much in your skills, but much more so in your determination. As such, we have to ask, will Elden Ring be a very difficult game? Well, no, but yes. Or better said, yes, but no. Sounds confusing? It really isn't. It is just a matter of understanding. Let's get started. Everything in life has an underlying basic level conception, the absolute most reduced understanding of a concept. The difficulty of Elden Ring also has this, and the best way to understand it is to see what Yasuhiro Kitao, producer of the game, has to say about it. Quote, "We didn't want to set out to make bosses harder for the sake of it. This of course applies to bosses that are crucial to the story of the game and beating the game. In terms of bosses that are unessential and optional and hidden, there are some of these that we have deliberately increased the challenge for those players who want to seek out this kind of experience." End quote. Straight away, we can understand the duality of Elden Ring's difficulty. There are two levels of difficulty within the game, represented by its story. A part of the game, the basic, essential part required for the story of the game, required to beat the game, has had its difficulty controlled. Notice that I did not say nerfed, or buffed, or changed, or adapted, or manipulated. I said controlled. Let's represent this. Every game is identical in its concept. A game is there to be beaten. A game has a start and an end. A game is about getting from that start, point A, to that end, point B. Everything that happens in the middle is the experience that each developer chooses to create for the player. The same happens in Elden Ring. Going from point A to point B is required to beat the game. And, according to Mr. Kitao, producer of the game, this section will have its difficulty controlled. In this line, we will not find any boss that is hard for the sake of being hard. In this line, we will not find any roadblocks that intend to frustrate players to the point that they may abandon the game. There seems to be an attempt to maintain a certain part of Elden Ring acceptably difficult so that most players will be able to complete it. But Elden Ring is about exploration and discovery. There is a huge part of the game that can be missed, or, better said, there is a huge part of the game that can be discovered. It is in these parts of the game where we will find difficulty. The secrets with secret bosses, the powerful guardians with powerful armor, the side paths, special weapons and items, the NPCs with their quest lines. It is here, in these optional areas, where the true difficulty will be found. These areas and bosses that are not required to beat the game that are not included in the line will not only be difficult, but they will be increasingly so. They are a separate experience that will offer the most important reward, the acknowledgement and recognition that the player got good. So, we know that the main part of the game will have its difficulty controlled, while a much larger, optional part of the experience will be unchained. Of course, in a game about exploration and discovery, almost every player will find themselves going into the optional, extremely difficult areas. It is impossible to not stroll into these additional secrets while exploring. Most players will experience both sides of the coin, but the objective of the developers is to make sure that players are able to finish the game. When it comes to the actual difficulty of the game, we have an exercise in comparison. We are comparing the challenges that the game provides against the different tools and mechanics that the game gives the player. In regards to challenges, we do not know exactly what Elden Ring will pit against us, but we have an idea based on our past experiences with the Souls games. We can expect tough bosses, some dangerous terrain, and particularly tough enemies waiting in difficult positions. But I am not so interested in the challenges that the game will bring. We will find these out as we play it. In fact, I am more interested in the different tools that we have to take on the different scenarios that the game will throw at us. It is in these different mechanics where we will find the truth in regards to just how difficult Elden Ring will be. The very first mechanic that the game offers us in order to beat the actual game is multiplayer. Specifically, we are talking about jolly cooperation. As usual, and since the beginning of the Souls, players are able to summon other players into their own game in order to receive help in a specific area or boss. In Elden Ring, this cooperation happens through two different systems. We have the standard summon sign system, in which a player leaves their summon sign somewhere in the lands between, and any other player that sees it can bring them into their world to help. This is the basic system that has been working throughout all Souls games that had multiplayer. Put the sign down, get summoned, cooperate. In Elden Ring, besides this system, we also have a secondary, more specific system to help in certain areas of the game. Sometimes some parts of the game can be specifically hard. Maybe it is a boss, maybe it is a side dungeon, or maybe a legacy dungeon in the main story of the game. Throughout these parts, the game offers what it calls summoning pools. Through the use of an effigy, players are able to send their summon sign straight to the different summoning pools that they have discovered. Their sign will be placed in this pool alongside the signs of all other tarnished that sent it there. They are all conveniently located in one place for everyone to find. A summoning pool achieves two purposes. First, all of the signs are in one place. Whoever needs help can go to the summoning pool and find everyone that is willing to give help. They can look around to see which tarnished looks the strongest, or the coolest, or, in my opinion, look for the naked one. They tend to be the best. Anyways, you get your pick of the help you want to receive. On the other hand, if you are the player offering help, you can use your effigy to drop your sign in the different pools and then continue on your merry way as you explore the lands between. Whenever the time comes that you are summoned, you will spawn at the pool as a friendly phantom. This is the very first mechanic that we have available to shift the difficulty of the game. Summoning other players to help you means that there will be more targets that the enemies will attack. It also means that there will be more sources of damage to help you beat a boss. And of course, each player has their own build, so we can reach a point where you receive help from casters and rangers that can deal damage from a distance. All of this adds to the strategy of the game and, as a result, makes the game easier. Of course, the game compensates for this as well. Summoning other players increases the statistics of the enemies in the game. The most basic thing is they have more health. This is done to balance the mechanic, making sure that the game does not turn into a cakewalk by just getting help from other players. That being said, it very much depends on what players you summon. Honestly, you may get unlucky and summon someone who is either not paying attention or simply not good at the game. This means that they provide no help at all, and you end up with enemies that have higher amounts of health. You can also experience the other side of the coin. You get some really good phantoms that simply destroy the enemies and bosses for you, and you don't really have to do much. This can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on you, but it can definitely happen. You do not know what you will get when you summon help, but generally it is the first thing that you can do to make the game easier. Taking advantage of the strength and knowledge of other players is a good mechanic, but it does have some downsides. Generally speaking, in Elden Ring you will never be invaded if you play solo. That said, if you choose to summon help, then this will change, and you will be put in the invasion pool. It is one of the drawbacks of this mechanic. If you want to run invasion free, then that means that you also have to go summon free. I will say this. You will always have the advantage over your invader. Elden Ring shifts the balance very heavily in the host's direction. You will always have the upper hand in numbers against the invader, either 2 versus 1 or 3 versus 1, and, generally speaking, your group should have more resources than the invader as well. The other downside of summoning help is mostly personal, but it is important. If you spend most of your game summoning players, then you are going to miss out on a lot of information on enemies and bosses. You will not learn their attacks and patterns as well as you would have if you were to fight them solo. I understand that dying repeatedly to the same boss can become frustrating, but summoning to get an easy out will only hurt you in the long run. I recommend that you always try to learn the fight by yourself before you move on to summoning. That being said, do as you think is best. There is no judgment here. Generally speaking, when you die in Elden Ring, you will be revived at the last site of grace that you rested at. Depending on where that is, that could be very far from where you died. So now, in order to get your runes back, you may have to travel a long way. The longer it is, the higher the chance that you can die again and, in turn, lose all of those runes that you had on you. This can be very frustrating and, taking into consideration just how big the world of the lands between will be, this may be a large source of stress for many players. As an answer to this, Elden Ring provides the players with Stakes of Marika. A Stake of Marika acts like a checkpoint or a mini bonfire. You cannot rest at a Stake of Marika, and it provides the Tarnished with no options to level up or do anything else. What it does do, though, is give the player a secondary option to spawn at. Upon death, the game will ask you if you want to respawn at the last site of grace you rested at, or if you want to spawn at the nearest Stake of Marika. This is a really good mechanic, and it offers some strategic option to the player. If you spawn at the site of grace, you will be able to rest and change Ashes of War, change which spells you have attuned, and have access to all of the different options that the sites of grace offers you. But you may be very far from the spot that you die at. On the other hand, if you spawn at a Stake of Marika, you will be much closer to the spot that you died at, making the run back much shorter and safer, but you lose the options that the sites of grace provides. I believe that this is a fantastic mechanic that makes the game easier by removing the stress and complication of running back to the boss that killed you. You are able to respawn and get back to the content that you want to do as soon as possible. You do not have to worry about long paths filled with enemies that will whittle down your resources as you try to get back to the boss. Now, it is a simple, shorter walk back, straight into the action as you learn the new bosses and mechanics. As you traverse and explore the lands between, you will notice that upon defeating certain enemies or certain groups of enemies, your Tarnished will see that his Flasks of Tears recover. After defeating every enemy in the group, you will get back a certain number of each flask, depending on the enemies that you have defeated. This mechanic allows us to replenish our healing without the need of constantly going back to rest at a site of grace. As a result, we are able to continue exploring the world as we have a way of getting back some of the resources that we spent while discovering the map. This mechanic is another one in a group of new help that players receive in order to reduce the amount of stress that we suffer while exploring. Normally, the longer you go without a bonfire, the more pressure that a player has on them. We see that our flasks are running low and we have less chances to recover health. We have less opportunities to make mistakes, and since we are so far away from a bonfire, dying at this spot will mean another 20 minutes of time getting back to make sure that we do not lose our runes. This is horrible. Elden Ring fixes this by rewarding the players who are able to consistently defeat the challenges that the game provides. Now, if you see a tough-looking enemy and you defeat it, you get some flasks back. If you see a large group of enemies and you're able to conquer it, you get some flasks back. As a result, after you succeed in battle, you still have the resources to continue exploring and moving forward. Now, in Elden Ring, finishing a tough battle does not mean that we have to stop exploring. On the contrary, it means that we can continue pushing forward to see what was behind these enemies, without worrying about running out of resources. Obviously, you will not get all of your flasks back, just a part of them. And obviously, the stronger the enemies you defeat, the more that you will get back. The mechanic seems to be balanced in a risk-reward system. The tougher the challenge, the more resources you regain. It is all intended to keep the player exploring for a longer period of time. This does not eliminate the difficulty of the enemies or bosses. They can still kill you, but it provides an additional reward to celebrate each and every victory that you find in the corners of the lands between. It is definitely a mechanic that makes the game easier if you're able to make good use of it. As you traverse the lands between, you will definitely find much of its nature and discover that the Tarnished can use the fruits of the land to his or her advantage. All of the wildlife, as well as the vegetation and caverns, provide the player with many materials that can be used to craft different consumable items that will aid in our journey. Elden Ring introduces to the souls a full crafting system. This system is simple and recipe-based. As long as you know the recipe of the item you're trying to make, you will be able to make it if you have the materials. In order to use this crafting system, the first thing you need is a crafting kit. This is a key item in the game that constitutes the first step to unlocking this system. Without a crafting kit, you cannot craft. But that is not all. Throughout the lands between, you will find the knowledge of different groups of its inhabitants. Each of these groups have recorded their knowledge in different cookbooks, and it is in these cookbooks where we find different recipes. Each cookbook that you find in the game will unlock a few different recipes that follow the flavor of the group that wrote it. For example, if you find a missionary's cookbook, which was recorded by a man that spreads holy teachings, then you will be able to make holy water. Each book provides different recipes, and the more you have, the more you will be able to make. Once you have your crafting kit and your recipe, you need to find the materials. These are scattered throughout the lands between, and they could be as easy to get as picking a flower from the meadow, or as hard to get as defeating a tough enemy to get one of its body parts. Some crafting materials are rarer than others, and this will affect the usefulness and power of the items that we craft. Now that you have the kit, the recipe, and the materials, it is as easy as going into your crafting menu, selecting the item you want to craft, and making as many of them as you can or need. The process is simple, seamless, and instant. In my opinion, this is one of the best new mechanics that Elden Ring brings to the table. It rewards exploration by giving more recipes to those that decide to look for them. Being able to craft different items and consumables means that we no longer have to buy them. We just need to have the tools on our character, and then, when we need them, create the items on demand. This means that we can prepare and adapt to different situations and strategies on the move. Maybe a specific enemy is weak to a firebomb, but maybe there's another one that is better dealt with a sleep arrow. Now we have the choice to make both of these items in the moment that we need it. This adaptability is really good for the game. Also, being able to craft different items means that we can choose to use different strategies. This improves our options and, once again, our chances of survival. A smart player will always have materials ready in case that a specific situation calls for a specific item. Sometimes areas of the games are difficult because we do not have the right tools for the job. Now, in Elden Ring, we're going to be able to instantly craft these tools. This increases the value of consumables in the game, and it definitely makes it easier to survive. In regards to new skills that the Tarnished can use in Elden Ring, we have unlocked crouching. Jokes aside, those that have played Sekiro will find a very similar stealth system has been included into Elden Ring. This is a very basic system. You crouch to make less noise, and to hide among large grass and behind trees and structures. This will allow you to sneak up to unsuspecting enemies to backstab them or snipe them with bows. There will be no icon in the HUD that will tell you if you are hitting or not, nor will we know when an enemy sees us until they actually do. Like I said, it is a simple system that requires player intuition. That being said, it is very effective. I am very happy with how stealth is working in Elden Ring. It provides a fantastic way to change the playstyle of the game. Now, a sniper build is very possible. An assassin build can be much better, and you have a secondary system to use when we need to retreat and get some time to heal. Having this option on the table is very good to diversify the experience of Elden Ring, and, in all honesty, it sets up the scenario where a properly built Tarnished can clear out an area without alerting anyone. If we combine ranged damage with sleep arrows and backstabs, the Tarnished can become a true wolf and dispatch enemies without making his or her presence known. This is definitely not my preferred playstyle, but it is always good to have more options for players to take advantage and express themselves. There may be some parts of the game where stealth and assassination are the best way to clear them. I don't know if a stealth system automatically makes the game easier, but having more tools in our belt to deal with all of these challenges is definitely a good thing. At some point in the game, the Tarnished will get his or her hands in a Spirit Color spell. This item allows us to summon spirits that take after the different enemies in the game. We are able to literally summon the same enemies that we face to have them fight for us. This is a new mechanic that helps the Tarnished face really powerful foes or large group of weaker enemies by providing an additional help in the battlefield. This is by no means a free help though. There are conditions that we must meet and requirements that we must respect. First and foremost, in order to be able to summon any spirits, we need to have their summon item on us. Each enemy type has their own summon item, and the Tarnished can search and collect them in their exploration. The more summons that you have, the more variety that you can enjoy. From a single foreign warrior that is a force to be reckoned with, all the way to a group of weak nobles that act more like a distraction than an actual help. Throughout the game, we will be able to find spirits that offer ranged supports and spirits that offer aerial support. There are many kinds to use. As long as you search and find their summon item, they will answer your call for help. Now, there are two important restrictions when it comes to these. First, you cannot do this while in multiplayer. If you're in co-op or in baiting, this option is off the table. Second, you cannot summon spirits everywhere. You can only do it in special places, specifically places marked by a rebirth monument. Whenever you are near one of these monuments, you will get the monument icon to the left of your screen. This means that you are free to summon any spirits to help your cause. One last thing, summoning spirits are not free. They require FP to use. Each spirit has their own FP cost, so we have to think strategically. Obviously, the strongest spirits will probably cost more FP, but sometimes it is better to have the option of using weaker spirits multiple times. It is all up to the Tarnished to make these decisions. I really like this mechanic, and it's one of my favorite additions to the game. Sometimes when you're playing solo, it is easy to get overwhelmed by many enemies. Or maybe there is just one big one that is chasing you. Being able to summon more bodies to the battle allows you to get the help you need to increase the distance between some enemies, or distract the big dangerous one, or provide additional pressure on enemies that would allow you to land a really big damaging attack. Spirits can be used for many different reasons, and they all provide many different abilities. Exploring the lands between to gather as many of these as possible is definitely a good idea. The more you have, the more options you can choose from, and, as we know, the more options we have, the easier it is to get through all of the challenges in the game. By now, after 10 years of Souls, everyone should know, more or less, how the combat of these games work. That said, Elden Ring brings a few new additions in regards to combat mechanics that I think are important enough to highlight. The two most important additions to this game, mechanically speaking, are, in my opinion, the stance system and the counterattack system. They provide a variety of enriched combat to all players. If a Tarnished is able to master and take advantage of these new systems, then a full world of combat possibilities will open to them. Let's start with the stance system. Very similar to what we found in Sekiro with the posture system, some attacks deal hidden values of damage to our enemies. When a certain threshold of damage is surpassed, this enemy will have their stance broken and they will be open for a powerful critical attack. Different attacks deal different posture damage. Charged R2s and jumping attacks are very effective to break the stance of an enemy. I have also seen spirit summons break enemy stances, and the new counterattack mechanic is also good at providing a stance break on weaker enemies. This is a very important mechanic because if you're able to chain different attacks that deal this posture damage, you will be able to take advantage of the critical hits that we get through stance breaking. Fighting a tough boss is nerve-wracking, but the battle can shift in your favor if you can get a good stance break that takes you to a critical hit. It is important to always be looking out for these situations. It is a very powerful mechanic that we cannot ignore. Include a lot of R2s in your fight style and always be smart about where to execute a jumping attack. All of this damage adds up and it will make your tough fights much less stressful. The next combat mechanic is my favorite, and I will be running a sword and board style character on my first playthrough just to use it as much as possible. As I mentioned before, it is the counterattack mechanic. After blocking with a shield or a weapon, the Tarnished can execute an immediate counterattack that deals additional damage to the enemy health as well as the enemy posture. This can lead to a stance break and a follow-up critical attack. This technique is perfect for defensive shield play. A Tarnished that likes to observe an enemy and learn its patterns can use this technique to block key attacks and punish them immediately. Please note that the counterattack can be interrupted. It is important to learn which attacks can be countered and which attacks should be blocked or dodged fully. When it comes to dealing with weaker enemies, the counterattack technique is fantastic. We are able to deal heavy damage to these enemies and break their posture in one fell attack. This leads to a critical hit and they will die. Counterattacks are different depending on the weapon that you use. Larger weapons can do counterattacks that have sweeping motions. This means that they can hit more than one enemy at a time, but they are slower. Smaller weapons have faster counterattacks, but they deal less damage and cannot hit multiple targets as easily. If you try to counterattack with a large hammer, you might be interrupted. But if you try to do it with a long sword, it will probably be quick enough that you can get your damage in. It is once again a matter of options and about choosing the right one for the right moment. Like I said, these mechanics completely change how the Tarnished play. They cannot be ignored. The challenges that the game provides are created while thinking of these mechanics. If you do not pay attention to them, practice them, and use them, you will make the game harder for yourself. I understand that it will take some time getting used to, but we must make the effort to include all of these techniques in our playstyle. So far in the video, I have provided a basic understanding of how the difficulty in Elden Ring will work. We know that the difficulty in the main story will be controlled in order to allow as many players as possible to beat the game. We also know that when you go into the side content and the exploration, you will find extremely challenging enemies and bosses. The producer of Elden Ring has warned us that some of these hidden bosses were made specially difficult to offer a greater challenge. We have also gone over some of the key mechanics that the game will give us in order to deal with all of its challenges. We have crafting mechanics, stealth mechanics, and combat mechanics, which offer us different options to tackle everything that the game will throw at us. Some of these mechanics, like co-op summons, have the possibility of making the game easier, while other mechanics, like the combat, are really just tools, and it depends on the player to use them effectively. So, the question remains, is Elden Ring going to be a hard game? Well, if you remember, I already gave you the answer. Yes, but no. As a player, you should expect a very challenging game with hard bosses and frustrating areas, just like every other Souls game. The formula will not change, and the challenge will not just simply disappear. There is no easy mode here, it is you versus the lands between, and it will stay like that until you're able to come out victorious. Do not expect an easier game, do not expect a simple experience. You will need to try your best, you will need to learn, and, of course, you will need to get good. Now, that being said, do not be afraid or intimidated. I gave you a few examples of mechanics that the developers give you in order to come out victorious. I just went over a few of the most important ones, but there are more. We have every single tool necessary in order to beat the game. It is a matter of learning how to use them and applying them to each and every boss fight. If you're the type of player that has an open mind, that is willing to try new things, that is able to experiment, and, most of all, if you are the type of player that will not give up, then this game has no chance of beating you. You got this, you will figure it out, and you will get good. On the other hand, if you refuse to put in the time to learn mechanics, if you refuse to have an open mind and take advantage of all of the tools that the game gives you, if you do not want to practice and experiment, in short, if you do not want to get good, then this game will be tremendously hard for you. The Souls are an extremely fair game. They reward those who explore, those who learn, and those who try. They will not hold your hand, and they will punish you for not paying attention. Is Elden Ring going to be a hard game? Yes, it will be, but no, it is not impossible. Yes, it is going to be a very difficult game, but no, it will not stop you. If you're willing to learn, the game will teach you. After that, the more knowledge you have, the easier the game will get. This happens with every Souls games. The more you know, the easier it gets. You just have to have the patience to get there. I promise that I will give you all of the tools that I can in order to increase your chances of success. I will try to show you how to get good, but I cannot get good for you. The journey of the Souls is something that each of us has to go through in our own way. And you will get there, like everyone else did. Does not matter how, as long as you get there. Believe in yourself, because I believe in you. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope I get to see you on the next one.